Okay, let's begin our webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Steve Salinas. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Siemplify. And today we're going to be talking about how to take a threat-centric approach to investigations. And I'm really happy and excited to have a couple of great partners with us today. I have Danil Panache from ThreatQ, ThreatQuotient, who's Threat Intelligence Engineer there. And then from Intel471, I have Moritz Lucas, Director. He's a director at Intel471. They're going to be helping us with our use case today, and helping me from a technical perspective is my colleague Daniel DeSarens. He's our senior security architect at Siemplify. So at any point during this webinar, if you do have any questions, please do enter them at the bottom of your screen. You'll see there's a Q&A section there. We're going to be monitoring that. We're going to be answering the questions as we go along. Just like any other webinar you've attended, this will be recorded so that you can reference it later, and then also as we send an email after the webinar so that you can share with your colleagues and kind of pass along some of this information that hopefully you find useful. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. And this is not going to be a heavy slide type of webinar. There are just a couple slides up front, and we're going to dive right into some technology and show you a use case in action. But to set the right stage, let's take a look at the architecture that our demonstration is built around today. So as I mentioned, we have Intel471 and ThreatQ with us today. They're going to be feeding threat intelligence, and we're going to get into some detail about that, obviously, during the use case discussion into the Siemplify Security Operations Platform, which I'm going to talk more about in a moment as well. In our environment, we are going to be ingesting alerts from McAfee ESM, as well as interacting in the environment, again, for the demonstration with McAfee EPO, which obviously interacts with your endpoints and helps you do a lot of different things. If you happen to be a McAfee user, you're very well familiar with all that. This is just a very high-level abstracted view of an architecture that is going to help us kind of talk to you about what we like to call threat-centric investigations. Before we get into the detail there, because I know some of you may not be completely familiar with Siemplify, I just want to quickly give a really high-level view of what the Siemplify Security Operations Platform is. It's a combination of 4 different, what we call building blocks. I'm going to go ahead and build this all the way out. So it all starts with the SOC workbench, and the whole purpose of our platform is to give security analysts, anyone that takes care of the duties of triage or investigation or taking response to potential security incidents. It gives them one view and one way to interact with all the different security controls in what we call the SOC workbench. Key part of this, though, obviously, is to enable faster, better investigations. There's this concept of orchestration coupled with automation. So orchestration is that process of, if you were to think about how you would interact or how you would investigate a potential security incident, what are the steps you would follow, what are the different products you would need to interact with. With our platform, you can automate those things. You can, first off, you can put them in a playbook, right? A digital playbook, which is a representation of all the different steps you would take. And then you can automate some or all of those different steps depending on your need. Obviously, the whole intent there is to help you conduct better, faster investigations. And we're going to be talking a lot about that today, and how you can make smart and great use of threat intelligence to get those things done. And then finally, obviously, if you are doing all of this stuff, it's really great to have some reports and insights into how your team's improving. Because one of the major benefits of our solution is increased productivity, increased efficiency, essentially helping you get through more investigations faster. But let's talk about, so that's kind of the basics of the platform. But what do we mean when we talk about a threat-centric approach? So you might think about, if you do work in a SOC, you're probably used to what pretty much everyone does, especially prior to the introduction of SOAR technologies, and we would say in the introduction of our technology. But at any rate, we call that kind of an alert-centric approach. So alerts come from somewhere, right? They come from your endpoint products, they come from your SIEMs, whatever. Some sort of alerting technology feeds the SOC alerts. If you happen to be using a SOAR, or even if you're not, essentially as the alerts come in, you have to start to investigate those, right? You have to kind of sort through them. You have to take some steps against those alerts to probably enrich them or get more information about it. And this would probably involve you dealing with a number of different technologies, maybe even switching from one product to the next. And then once we've kind of got more information about it, you're going to, again, take that process, whether it's written down process, whether it's kind of in your mind because you've been doing the job a long time, against those different alerts. The problem with this approach and why we think it can be improved on is very manual. It's extremely time consuming. And especially if you work in a SOC with more than a couple of analysts, there's a really good chance that you will be working on an alert that someone else is also working on and not really seeing some of them are obvious to see that they're connected, and maybe you can do that. Maybe you can manually combine those investigations. But sometimes it's not so obvious. So when we talk about a threat-centric approach, what we're really talking about is instead of straight away going straight to enriching the alerts that come in to our system, we analyze them the very first thing we do. And what we're looking for are any commonalities, anything that would represent or identify that, you know what, these alerts, why they might not be apparent to be related, they actually are. And we have the ability, using our contextual analysis engine, to group these alerts together into a case. So now, instead of, if you think about it conceptually, instead of taking one alert and making one case, we have the ability to take one alert, 5 alerts, 10 alerts, 50 alerts, and pulling those all together, if they're related, into one case. Now that one case can be assigned to one analyst. And using the orchestration automation capabilities, you can remove a lot of those manual steps. And again, as we're going to talk about today, interact with other sources of intel, threat intelligence, to get more knowledge about the alerts themselves, and it allows you to complete a comprehensive investigation. So if you think about it, if you're pulling all of these alerts together, it's the way that you might proceed with them. If it's 1 or 2 alerts, okay, maybe it's a very minor type of security event. Or if you identify that, wow, I have 50 alerts that are all related, so we're under some sort of coordinated attack. Now you're going to maybe set off some different alarm bells, take some further escalation if that's apparent. So that's what we're really talking about when we talk about threat-centric approach. And coupled with that is again, as I've mentioned already, using threat intelligence in the best and most efficient way possible. So now let's jump right into the use case. And again, as we go through this, we're going to be looking at different technologies. Please do submit any questions you have. And the use case that we've selected for today's demonstration is a very common one that you probably may even dealt with today, a phishing attack, right? So phishing obviously is someone sending an email and trying to coax or entice an employee to interact with that email, click on it, open a PDF, whatever, go to a website, so that they can extract sensitive customer data from your environment, or somehow, pass some sort of malicious software into the environment, essentially cause some damage, right? And they're very prevalent. It's not a new vector, but it's a very prevalent one because it's pretty easy to do. There's a lot of tools available to make these phishing attacks pretty easy, frankly. And they're super time consuming. If you think about your SOC and how you probably have to deal with these phishing investigations, I would bet they're in the top 2 or 3, if not the top most time consuming issue that you have in your SOC. So we're going to talk about how taking a threat-centric approach to that type of investigation might be able to help you out. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Moritz from Intel471.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody. My name is Moritz from Intel471. And from our perspective, this use case is actually a very good demonstration of intelligence-led security. What we do at Intel471 is we have a team of researchers dotted around the globe that collects information and builds intelligence on actors and the tools they use, and we deliver that intelligence to our customers in a variety of ways. The aim being to aid decision-making, both on a strategic, a tactical, as well as an operational level. The goal of the intelligence offering is to enable and help our customers move from a very reactive approach to a much more proactive approach when it comes to mitigating risk. basically by no longer just looking at either their own attack surface or what is happening to your peers, but to actually step outside the perimeter and build up a detailed insights into what the top actors in the cyber underground are discussing and planning, and provide real-time details on the tooling that they're using. And that kind of falls down to our two different offerings, which is adversary intelligence and malware intelligence. If I can have the next slide, please. So for today's kind of demonstration, we're going to base it off this report. Our intelligence contains various kinds of TTPs, which by their nature are actionable. In this case, it's details on a phishing tool that we observed in a different incident, where an actor obtained access to an organization and offered that access for sale in a closed top-tier forums. So these TTPs are directly sourced from the location where these threats are developed, the cyber underground. And they're an example of actionable intelligence, which is ingested by ThreatQ for matching and correlation against other sources, such as OSINT, open source intelligence feeds, telemetry, etc., etc. And as you will see from our partners, ThreatQ and Siemplify, after a match, Siemplify allows you to take appropriate action automatically, reducing the lift required on your side. So the result is structured intelligence is automatically applied to prevent incidents and to mitigate risks and impacts due to threats emanating from the cyber underground. One of the key aspects to this approach is that the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, applies here as well. It all starts with good quality intelligence with a low false positive rate. There is little sense in building a SOAR capability unless you base it on high quality intelligence. And that's where Intel471 comes in. Using our many years of experience and our team of experienced researchers around the globe gives us unrivaled access to the cyber underground and allows us to collect meaningful intelligence, both on the communications of top actors, as well as tracking malware families and supporting infrastructure such as bulletproof hosting, exploit kits, etc., in real time. But for this use case, we're going to focus on this particular incident and the details on that phishing toolkit that we extracted from it. I will now pass it over to Daniel from ThreatQ, who will show what that looks like in ThreatQ.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Moritz. And once we have the ThreatQ system up, I'll continue on the specific example here. But before we dive into the specific pieces of what we're looking at here as an object within our system, as a threat intelligence platform, ThreatQ's focus is on funneling multiple disparate sources of threat data into usable and actionable threat intelligence. So not only do we get the high fidelity information from Intel471, but through our feed ingestions from segmented internal and external sources, we can then normalize, deduplicate, and correlate them together. So once we have that central threat library built out, we leverage our integrations to help engineers and analysts create workflows and playbooks with other security ecosystem entities, such as Siemplify. And as you can see later on, and as Moritz very clearly mentioned, that garbage in, garbage out adage really does apply here as well, because we want to make sure that that high level of fidelity that we obtain from Intel471 is then correlated against internal information. And that increases that prioritization as well. And our entire system is built upon APIs, which lends itself to a very malleable framework on which we build our integrations and feed ingestions. So one of our biggest proponents or components of ThreatQuotient here is the fact that we're able to normalize, deduplicate, and correlate all these disparate pieces of data together. So as you can see here within the attributes, we have information coming from Intel471, from Cofense, from an internal SIM. We work with many, many different ecosystem partners such as McAfee ESM, QRadar, Splunk, etc. And so really we start seeing that cohesive baseball card view of exactly what's going on within this particular object in our system. And of course, once we have this information coming in, what can we do with that information? Well, that's where we use our link analysis and our relationships to showcase and to allow engineers and analysts to build out all those different pieces that they need in order to conduct their investigations and hunting. So we can create and obtain confidence levels around adversaries directly from the sources or from our engineers and analysts themselves if they want to set it manually. Additionally, any files related to this, if we're looking at something like a PalmStorm PDF here, we not only keep these files in our system for further and future dissemination, but we can then reference these files as we continue our investigation to really create a bigger and more holistic picture of what exactly is happening with relation to the spearfish campaign and this indicator here. Now, the really cool thing, at least in my humble opinion, is the fact that we can correlate against that internal information. So not only do you get that high fidelity level of information from Intel471, but then you can also see by correlating with the internal ESM sighting that this is something that you need to focus on very, very closely as a result of the fact that it has been found within your internal environment. And that's something that really we want to focus on simply because that's really where the definition of actionable intelligence comes into play. Going from threat data to intelligence is this step right here, and that's the correlation. And of course, we can also show and see any related indicators, as well as any kind of comments surrounding this particular investigation. And with the operations and integrations that I mentioned before, we have many, many operations that we have available, but all of these allow both upstream and downstream enrichment of data, as well as workflow and playbook data pushing like we do with Siemplify. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention before we move on to the Siemplify piece is the scoring. And that's incredibly important, as Moritz mentioned, with the garbage in, garbage out, because being able to allocate which pieces of data take priority over other indicator type, over other pieces of data is very, very important for us here. Simply because that prioritization is what creates that next downstream moment where we can really dive into what exactly needs to be done surrounding this indicator. And we score based on indicator types, such as CVEs, IP addresses, hash, indicator sources, such as Intel471. So we know that Intel471 has a high level of fidelity, so we score it higher. If there's an analyst or a source like an OSINT that we want to score lower, then we can do that as well. Attributes, such as malware families, a high level of confidence, et cetera, and adversary relationships like APTs and FINs. And so once we have all that information in play and we have it within our system, then we can go in and say, and let Siemplify do the magic that they do with the playbooks.
Okay, thanks for that. And we're going to pass it over to Daniel from Siemplify now.
Yeah, sorry guys, I guess I was muted on my headset here. So yeah, so like I was saying, thanks Daniel too, I appreciate that. So as we pull information in from your various different sources, like your SIM solution and ESM, and whatever other sources of alerting that you have, we're going to start to create cases. And with those cases, we pull in the indicators that are a part of those alerts. Things like what we would describe as entities, like your hashes, your URLs, and your IP addresses. Those things are going to get pulled into the case, and we're going to look at them, and we're going to start to group things together. Similar to like what you might see in some of these other cases that I have in here. We have 6 alerts or even like a single alert in this instance, but we start to group things together to show you really the threat that's happening. And so as we pull that information in, though, we want the analyst to really be able to identify and to really get to that answer faster. And so what we've given the ability to do is really to see the information about what's happening, when it happened, as well as like just that who's involved in the incident here. But really, we want to be able to present information that's going to be relevant to the analyst so that he can make decisions more quickly. And so we utilize the insight section here to really help with that. So supplying information about the user, or even about the intel that we're getting from ThreatQ or even Intel471, or even some of the information that we can automatically pull from VirusTotal. We're pulling all that information together so that when the analyst comes and starts to do his investigation, he has all that the information there so that he can make the decision about what that next step might be. And we work all this through with our automated playbooks that go out to the various sources like ThreatQ, grabbing in the adversary details that Daniel was just showing us, or even the event information, or that score that he was mentioning that they present in that incident, in the indicator. That gives us a level of confidence that says that if I have this level of score within this indicator, then I can be confident that this is truly a malicious indicator. And so as we go through and gather all those details, we then are utilizing that information within our decision point that says that if this indicator is high, then I want to go ahead and start to do my remediation actions. So that might be something similar to what we have here, which is going out into the NSM and doing a block, or going out to your EPO and changing a policy. Or even could include searching some emails, or even sending emails out. It kind of depends on what your process might be, to what those next steps could be. But it ultimately is utilizing the threat intelligence information that we're collecting from ThreatQ and Intel471, and really driving your response based on that information. And so as you look at the details here, though, we can even make more informed decisions that allow your analysts to react and become more efficient and get to the answer faster. And so I can pass it back over to you, though, Steve.
Okay, that's great. So I'm going to kind of circle all the way back around here. So what we've shown you in just a few minutes here really is how, for like in this example again, it was a phishing email that you needed to investigate. Intel471, ThreatQ, providing the threat intelligence and showing you how you can use their different platforms and all that richness of data that they can pull together and do a lot of that legwork for you. All of it, really. Getting it into an easily digestible and actionable format. And then what Daniel just showed you is, instead of having to go out and hunt and peck for all of this data, our Siemplify security operations platform pulls it all together for you, shows you what we call, like here, the insights, what you really need to know about the alert. In this example, one alert, but it could be, like I said, 10, 20, 30 alerts or more. What's the important information you need to know about it, so that you can get to a decision point? Do you need to take a response, or do you not need to take a response? So that's really the benefit of using a threat intelligence in a smart and effective way, and incorporating that into our threat-centric approach to investigations to help you get more efficient. So I did get a couple of questions that have come in. So we're going to spend a couple of minutes looking and going through some questions. If anything else comes up as we are having a discussion, please do enter them in the Q&A section. So Moritz, here's a question for you. It says the type of Intel471 indicators that are integrated into ThreatQ, are they sourced by Intel471 with any level of confidence to help reduce false positives?
That's actually a really good question. So yes, firstly, all of our indicators are sourced by ourselves. They come from our own sources, and all of them also come, indeed, it's very important, with what we call a confidence rating. So basically, the level of confidence that we attach to that particular indicator. Also, because of our rich API, the way we structure our API, we never just pass over the indicator by itself. It always comes surrounded with context, and also links into the rest of our data sets, so you can pull in even more context should you want to. But all of them come with a confidence rating. And we only have a couple of flavors. Basically, it's either medium or high. We don't pass on low confidence indicators. We think there's very little sense in them. And also we have very few of them, because we are collecting from the cyber underground itself. So we know that what we are collecting, where it comes from, and what its intent is. That's the reason why we're passing it on. So we pass them on with a confidence rating of either medium or high. That's
great. I mean, and I would think for a typical organization, I mean, getting that type of access, you're not going to be able to get that access to the underground like that. I mean, that's what you guys, that's your specialist.
No, indeed. I think it's a good position to be in. It took us, to be honest, a fairly large team and many years of hard work and many combined years of experience in doing this in various roles to get to where we are. So it really doesn't. I can think of very, very few organizations for whom it would make sense to kind of try and build up that type of capability yourself. It makes much more sense to rely on other experts to.
Well, yeah, and I think, I mean, even going further than that, I think there's a risk there. If you're in there and you don't know what you're doing, you may do something, or expose yourself to additional threats. If you're
indeed, it's a two-way street. Sometimes the underground tries to bite back, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to take the right type of precautions. And yes, also if they do understand that you are not what you claim to be, there's also the option that they try and intentionally feed you false information. So then it becomes actually worse than useless because you're actually collecting false information. So these are all things that we take into account and have extensive measures to detect, avoid, but mostly avoid in the first place.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so here's one for ThreatQ. So a little bit maybe more information about the scoring and the workflow. You know, what's the role that it plays in what you showed today. And then another one, maybe not necessarily related, but obviously you have a lot of great information in your system. Is there any ability for the user to actually pull the reports or the files that you're finding to do additional analysis, maybe like in a sandbox or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So with the first question, how does score play a role within ThreatQ? The way that the score plays a role is that we use it as a prioritization metric. So our goal is to funnel all that data into something that's usable and actionable. Again, that high level of confidence that we get from Intel471 is incredibly useful in determining the score. That's one of the metrics that we can use to determine our final score, in addition to, like I mentioned earlier on, the source, the type, as well as the relationships with the adversaries. So again, our score is then ingested by a tool like Siemplify to further propel forward the investigation and to create, again, a better overview of how important is this to the organization themselves, not just to the ecosystem in general, but to that organization and to their priorities and to their workflows. With regards to the reports and files, absolutely. All the reports and files that we store within our system and the ones that we also parse through for indicators and information, analysts can then later go into ThreatQ and pull that down for further analysis and investigation.
That's great. Excellent. Okay, Daniel, for Siemplify. So a couple of questions about the screen that we're actually looking at. So maybe if you can kind of give a little bit of an overview of this, and then also follow-up question, the playbooks that we're using or that you're showing here, are they customizable? How do you create them? And does Siemplify provide templates or example playbooks for users to start with?
Sure, yeah. So what you're looking at right now is our case queue in the left-hand side here. This is where we can prioritize and filter the cases. But as I click on a case, you're going to see what the analyst would really work through when he's working a case. You're going to see the alert up at the top here. This is our timeline of events. The entities here on the right-hand side would be the indicators. For instance, you've got like your usernames, your IP addresses, and hashes here. And really, when we get to the insight section here, this is really where we're driving the information that we have within our playbooks and that we're collecting from the various different sources. And we're putting them in front of the analysts so that they can see that detail right away. They're not having to go and dig through various different solutions. They're not having to go and open up multiple different tabs. It's all right here for them to see so they can make decisions more quickly on the playbook that is right below it here. This is a playbook that could be is automated actions that are happening all the way up to this point, and then there's an action that could be then manually taken by executing that McAfee action to go out and block a hash, or it could even be an automated action that you're blocking the hash based on the confidence level that we have within the sources that we've collected from threat intelligence that says this hash is definitely malicious. Let's go ahead and block it. And so that's what you're seeing here within this screen. And when it comes to building out playbooks, though, we do have templates that you can use, but our playbooks are also very easy to create. As you can see here, here's the playbook that I was just running through. But to simply modify or even to extend this playbook, it's just a matter of dragging and dropping the different actions into the screen. And so the enrichment action can be dragged and dropped and placed into here. And then you can utilize that information by the information that's being collected by just going into the different actions and then looking at the placeholders. And now I can make various different comparisons or conditional statements, and then ultimately start to remediate the actions based on the data that I'm collecting as well. And so this is where you can go into actually start to build out that playbook, and then utilizing templates as well as possible. We do have several different templates that we have built for you to use that you just copy and then start to tweak to your needs.
That's great. So one of the things I'll add here too around the playbooks, if you go to our website, we just released a brand new version of our products, some really cool changes in our playbooks and introducing the concept of playbook lifecycle management, which we actually, I think we just posted a blog on today. take a look at a short little video. One of the key differences here, if you compared it to some of the other source solutions, while there might be still some configuration and maybe like pseudocoding you would do for ours, literally you don't have to be a coder or programmer to work with it. As Daniel just showed, you just literally can select an action, drag it in, you kind of snap in this. I kind of like to think about it as I'm snapping together actions. Behind the scenes, there's obviously some code and things that are going to be interacting with APIs and other integrations, so on and so forth. But you don't have to be a Python programmer to make those things work. So I think that's really cool as well. Real quick, two final questions, and then we'll end it here. For everyone, all the partners, and we can answer from Siemplify's point of view. How are you deployed and how are you licensed or priced? So Intel471.
So we are deployed. We're an intelligence product, so we're basically cloud-based. We have a variety of customers. So where they have our own portal that customers can access for doing research, accessing reports, et cetera. But at the same time, we also have a variety of integrations, either through our standard API or through off-the-shelf integrations with tools and products such as ThreatQ, Siemplify, and others, which allow you to kind of pull down our data, interrogate it, or integrate it into your workflows and your other tooling.
Excellent. So Daniel?
Yep, no problem. We are deployed as an OVA on premises or as a cloud or hosted implementation. So we are pretty flexible in that regard. As far as pricing is concerned, we're priced per seat that uses ThreatQ itself. So we do not charge per integration or feed.
Excellent. And then I can answer from Siemplify. We are generally deployed on premises, but we can be deployed in the cloud as well. And we are priced on a per user basis as well. A couple of different options there. So the final question I'll just have to the group here is, and anyone that wants to answer or everyone can answer is, so we've kind of gone through a lot of different things, a lot of different technologies. We've introduced a little bit of some new, maybe potentially new concepts on how to complete investigations. From your perspective, what would be the one key point you'd want everyone to take away from the webinar? I have my perspective. So I think when we look at what we're really talking about here, we all know that SOCs, the staffing in SOCs, it's tough, right? You would like to have more analysts. You'd like to have more, maybe even more senior analysts and people that have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. But that's just not the reality we live in today, right? As you know, the little discussion with Moritz about as far as like understanding the underground or understanding the threat intelligence with ThreatQ or having all the deep experience and able to know how to respond to each and every type of alert that might come into the system. It's just not possible. So I think right now in today's environment, you really need to make use of automation and look at how your processes are and where they can be improved. And things like incorporating and making good use of threat intelligence is a great way to do that, as well as from the benefit of the Siemplify Secure Operations Platform is that analysis and the contextual analysis up front to group the alerts together, so you're not doing alert by alert investigation where you will never catch up or have a remote chance of making a dent in your backlog, to taking this threat-centric approach to combining and consolidating. I think that's really the key takeaway, right? Look where you can use automation. We're certainly not saying automation is going to be the key. You can't automate everything. I don't think that's ever going to be possible. But look at places where you can use it. And this today, what we've shown you, I think, is a great example of that.
Yeah, and Steve brings up an excellent point, is that there's just not enough people out there to really be able to take all that information and be able to really start building out their cases as they go through. So really, and I'm speaking from ThreatQuotient side, but I believe that this goes for all of us here, Intel471 and Siemplify included, is that our goal is to bring those tier 1 analysts and engineers to the capability and level of a tier 2 and 3 by A, increasing the fidelity of the information they receive, B, creating a workflow around that information, and C, being able to enable them to then take that information and spread it across multiple teams and a collaboration. So really, at the end of the day, the main takeaway is to make sure that those engineers and analysts really rise up beyond their capabilities. And our goal is to enable that to happen.
That's a great point. Yeah,
and I think I'll echo that. And I think What this shows is basically a variation of it is important to move from a reactive to a much more proactive approach. So working your way backwards, as Steve said, to move away from an alert-driven approach, reacting to alerts, to actually pivoting towards reacting to threats, and not just to threats as they are happening, but get in front of them by understanding the threat landscape and possibly allow you to take appropriate measures before you need to whack-a-mole or put out a fire. So basically moving from reactive to proactive, and using automation to help you achieve that wherever possible, and always keeping in mind that the old adage still stands: garbage in, garbage out. It has to do with the quality of your tooling and the quality of the intelligence and the information that you put into those tools and processes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Great insights there. So I think that's going to probably wrap it up for us today. So thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, we are going to be sending out a follow-up email after this to get more information and more. Obviously, none of us went through a detailed demonstration of our technologies. Please reach out to us to schedule that, either from Intel471, ThreatQ, or Siemplify, obviously, as well as let us know other types of use cases you would like to look at, because this was again one example of how you can take a threat-centric approach and apply threat intelligence to help you make better informed decisions. There are obviously a lot more that you could possibly do. So with that, we'll sign off for today, and have a good rest of your day, evening, afternoon. Thanks, everyone.